And thank you so much. We're so excited to have you. If you don't know Nicola, she's from the National Notary Association. And I believe you just recently got promoted. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, I did. I got a promotion at the beginning of January, and I was very excited.
Congratulations. And what is your title now?
I'm the Director of Training and Education.
That's amazing. And you also cover, or the hotline is also underneath your purview. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I actually brought with me today the supervisor of hotline. Her name is Wendy Melendez. She's here. She's got a little hotline in her corner, and she knows all things notary too. So I couldn't do it without her and this team because they are amazing.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. So for everybody who's new or hasn't been here, it's sort of an open forum for us. I'm not really, you don't need to raise your hand necessarily. We like people to jump in and out if you have questions. They can be NNA specific, they can be notary specific, they can just be general questions that you have. Make sure you let us know what state that you're in so that we know how to answer that question for you. I do want to start asking Nicola, tell me around how many calls you guys answer on the hotline every single year.
Oh, every year? Okay, well, I guess I could do the math. It's like 10,000 a month. So what is that? 120,000 calls?
A lot of calls. 10,000 calls.
Yes. And so, you know, some months it's a little less, some months it's a little more. And then Wendy supervises a team of 17 consultants that work full-time and part-time. And she's created an amazing resource library that we have to make sure that all the information is up to date. So like one of the things that we were charged with and Wendy kind of led was every time an emergency regulation came in during COVID, Wendy was in charge of updating it and letting the whole team know about it. So as calls were coming in, you know, day to day, things were changing about what you could and couldn't do. And you could use Zoom and you can't use Zoom and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then every state was putting out emergency orders or executive orders. And then they would only be good for like a certain amount of time. And then we'd have to go back. Did they renew? Did they not renew? So to say that I'm happy that the pandemic is over is so true, like on a different level than even health or the actual, you know, disease itself. I'm just talking about regulation wise, we kind of have been able to take a deep breath over the last month and just say, okay, let's get back to regular business.
Now, have most of the states gone by the wayside with their emergency regulations? Like are we all back to business as usual? Are there still some states that have some temporary regs in place?
Oh, off the top of my head, I want to say like 98% are back to normal.
Okay.
There might be a couple outliers. And if I'm wrong, Wendy can shake her head and tell me I'm wrong. But I feel like we haven't had any extensions in a while that have really, that have come up. But yeah, for the most part, all that temporary stuff is kind of over.
We love that. Now, let's tell us, what is your number one question you get at the hotline? Like, is it concerning a notary stamp or a specific state rule? Like, what do you get a lot of questions about in general?
Probably the most common is either, can I notarize this document or can I take this ID? Those are like the two that come up the most common with people who have a document they've never had presented to them before. And they're just like, is this something I'm allowed to notarize? Because it's outside of the regular purview of like what they've notarized before. So, you know, that's always something that like blows my mind, but at the same time makes sense because it's like, well, if I only got told about these documents, then maybe I can't do these documents. And, you know, there's always the rumors of like, don't touch a will or don't touch this. And so I think that's the peace of mind kind of that hotline offers, is just the ability to call and get that yes or no. Even if you kind of already know, that's the magic of hotline, is just that like confirmation of like, yes, go ahead, or yes, but look out for these things. And, kind of thing. And same thing with the IDs, especially, I mean, New York got really specific with the new stuff that just came out, but for a while there, it was very vague and not sure. So I know a lot of the calls that hotline gets from New York would be, hey, what about this ID or what about that ID? And, you know, there isn't much guidance that was coming out of the department to kind of say yes or no one way or the other.
Now, if there was something that you wish more notaries would call in about, you think of something that you feel like they would search out the information more often?
No, but I'll tell you something I wish people would call before they did the thing that they're calling to ask whether or not they should have done. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
We get a lot of calls of, hey, I just did this bad thing that I have a feeling I shouldn't have done. Should I have done it? And my wish is you would have called and go, hey, I think I'm about to do a bad thing, rather than I just did it. Because what happens is, you know, you get that panic, you get that freak out of like, okay, what's going to happen now? And am I going to be found out? And that's like that underlying stress that like one does not need in their daily life. So getting that peace of mind up front and just saying, you know, hey, I'm about to do this and I'm not 100% sure. I think a client any day of the week would take you stepping away to double check rather than, you know, not being embarrassed at the table. And just like if there was a problem with them, you would want to call and get their questions answered. You do the same and make that phone call ahead of time and just say, okay, like, let's go forward. I got the green light. I feel much better. Because now you're sitting and waiting, like, I wonder if I'm going to hear back about that thing. And I don't know, that's too much stress for me.
It's true. Who has a question for Nicola or Wendy? We'll put her on the spot too.
Oh my God, she's very shy. Don't put her on the spot. She'll kill me.
Okay, we'll put Nicola on the spot and then Nicola can put Wendy on the spot and then it won't be on us.
Okay, fair.
Hi, this is Sonia D'Amico in New York. And I just I have actually a specific question about the journals that we are now required to do in New York State. Now I originally bought my journal years ago from the NNA, and there's nothing in the journal as to where to put how many notarizations I'm doing, say, within a refinance package.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about that requirement. And so the recommendation that I would make if you're using an NNA journal is there is a column called additional information. And you could just write it into that space. And again, I'm speculating. I have no idea what the lawmakers were thinking when they did it, but there are journals out there that have the ability to do multiple entries on one line by checking boxes or something like that. So my guess is they either have a space for it somewhere, or, you know, you can make a notation in some of their notes sections. But I don't think that, you know, like the NNA journal has a space to write the name of the document, and that isn't even a requirement with these new, you know, in the new laws that are coming out for New York. So, you know, there's going to be it's always good to get, you know, more than you need as long as you're not violating anybody's privacy. So I would say the best spot to do that is probably additional information. If you're going to use the journal you have already, and then maybe in your, you know, when you fill that one up, and you're looking for another one, there may be one that has, you know, something where you like easier to write that information in. But it's, you know, mostly, and that assumes that you're going to notarize more than one document at a time.
Right. Okay. And my other question, if I may, is where it asks for the notary fee. Now, I know per se we are only allowed to charge $2, but you know, title companies, notary companies pay us a bit more than $2 per notarization. So are we required to put our whole fee down? Is that what they're looking for here?
No. So keep in mind, though, that the journal and the requirement to put the fee is what is the person whose signature is going in that spot? What are they paying you for that notarization? So in the instance with like a loan signing or something, that person signing hasn't paid you $1. So you're actually going to put 0. And then that way you do the record keeping for whatever the title company or the signing service paid you in your books. And that's how it works, because you're not actually charging a fee to the person who's signing in your journal and whose information is going in there. It's a third party that you're contracted with. So the recommendation is put 0, because I can assure you, if you write $2, that is now going to bring up, hey, wait, I didn't pay $2 to the title company. It says here, you know, the notary is getting paid XYZ. And now you have a whole other conversation that's kind of uncomfortable. So best thing to do is just put the 0, because that person whose name is going in there didn't pay you directly anything.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great.
Now, Nicola, in states where you can charge a travel fee or something additional, would you also notate that in your journal, or would that only be the actual notarial act that you're performing, that fee?
So I'll use California as an example, because we can charge $15 for each notarial act plus travel that's agreed to. And it just depends on the notary. There's no requirement to document the travel fee anywhere. So, you know, it just depends on how you want to keep your records. Do you want to have the record there, but then you're going to write it down in front of the borrower or the, you know, whomever, your signer, as you're doing the transaction? Or do you want to track it on some software or your records or your Excel spreadsheet, however you do your books? So it's really up to there's no requirement, unless the state requires that you put the travel fee in there as well. It's completely up to the notary. Wendy, do you agree with what I just said? You're on mute.
If it's a state where you have a requirement to enter a specific entries for your journal, it probably would be a better idea for you to keep it separated, especially if you have a standard that you have to follow for when you're providing a copy of that journal entry. That's information that you don't need to share with whoever that party is, because sometimes it may not even be the person that you notarized for. If you are in a state where you don't have a required journal, but it's always still recommended, then in that instance, it really would be up to you how you keep your records. But it's always a good idea to keep that separate.
Thank you for that. And consistency, right? Like, we want to make sure if you are keeping track in your journal of that travel fee, that you do it for everyone, right? And if you're not, then you don't do it for anyone. That's an important piece.
100%.
I love that we jumped into the journal for a minute, because with the here in New York, it's new, but we've been hearing a lot of conversation about journals, and none of it is really super exciting, right? It's a lot more work. It's a lot more time consuming. Like,
it's a lot more protection.
And that's what I was going to say. So the conversation, you know, for a lot of people is, if a notary wants to commit fraud, is that journal going to stop them? And we talk about, it's really more about the consumer being protected, right?
Correct.
So can you kind of talk about that a little? Because I think it's important for people to understand why there's a journal requirement. And even when there's not, right? In New York previously, at least for me, I always kept a journal because it's a best practice. So why is that, Nicola? What's important about keeping a journal?
That journal is your receipt of the transaction. So essentially, like, you're getting this document handed to you, you're doing your business, you're stamping it, you keep no record of where your stamp went, and it's just out in the universe. So I can tell you, especially in California, and the fraud that gets committed here, people duplicate notary stamps all the time, start using them for fake notarizations. And, you know, if you didn't keep track, how would one know, like, oh, I did notarize that. No, I didn't notarize that. You have no receipts. So in the words of Whitney Houston, show me the receipts. Like, you have to have that journal. And that, even if you're capturing the most basic information about the document that you're notarizing, who it was for, the date that it happened, the time that it happened. You're just capturing basic things. And then when we get down to the signature, you're proving that person was in front of you. So this is like so much evidence that you're piling up to A, if someone says you didn't do something. So take like a verification on oath or affirmation, or a jurat, whatever it's called. If you're writing down every time you give an oath or affirmation, and then later on your transaction gets challenged and they go, she never gave me an oath, but you systematically document, you always give an oath when you give an oath. This is like what they, there's a fancy Latin term for it, but it's essentially evidence that it's going to hold up in court that you as a standardized practice are documenting this information. Like you would never dream of owning a business and not keeping some records or receipts. This is your notary records and receipts. So I'm excited for you.
One more question. So if you've never been to an NA conference and heard Michael Clausen speak, you have to go because he's amazing. He's my notary crush. I say this all the time. I think he's fantastic. And he makes a great point about making sure that you put in your journal when you decline a notarization, right?
Yep.
That's equally as important as when you do one, because you want to make sure that they shows what is the importance of saying, hey, I didn't do this notarization.
Because what you're trying to prove is that you had a lawful reason to refuse. So if someone comes back later and says, well, this notary refused to provide services for me, notaries are public servants. So you want proof. I told them no because the ID they presented didn't meet the requirements of law. I told them to come back with X, Y, and Z. I didn't notarize for this lady because she just got a morphine shot at the hospital and couldn't tell me what her name was. So I refused the notarization, because what happens is when people pass away, for some reason, people get real ugly and the fighting begins and the documents all come into play. And the first thing that they're going to do is look at the notarization and try to discredit it in some way to try to throw this document out. So by having your ducks in a row and making those notations, you can be able to explain, like, I didn't do this because, you know, the family was fighting and I left the room. I mean, there's so many reasons why one would say no. And all you're doing is protecting yourself that you had a lawful reason to do so.
That's great information and super important, because I will say, before I heard Professor Clausen speak, I would have never thought to say that I put in my journal that I declined a notarization. It would have never crossed my mind, but that's an important piece. John said,
I don't remember what I wore yesterday.
I know, right? And that's the thing,
Yeah.
how many notarizations, especially if you're like, honestly, right? If you do this full time or you're a loan signing agent, you remember the things that, you know, happen in a closing that are not typical, right? But for the most part, how many times we've been somewhere and the person's been like, hey, you closed my loan for me 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh, so nice to see you again. But really in the back of my mind, I'm like, did I really? Because I don't remember that. That might just be old age on my part, but it's super true. John says that in Nevada, they require travel fees to be entered in the journal. John, is there a cap for what you can charge? Do you want to unmute and talk to us? You don't have to.
Yeah, depending on the, well, I might be thinking of yesteryear, but it used to be that depending on the hours they were traveling, they have set travel fees of what they're allowed to charge.
It's always interesting to hear what other states can do, isn't it? And then you can take it back to your state and see if that's something that you want to advocate or try to change. Who else has a question for Nicola? Diana Hansen, I know you do.
Oh, it looks like John just, oh, sorry, John. It looked like John just unmuted himself for a second.
Hey, John.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did. It varies by the time of day and how many hours. The minimum, it's $15 per hour during the daytime, which is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can charge a minimum of 2 hours, which would be a minimum of $30 for travel. And then if it takes more than 2 hours, and that's for round trip. And if it's over 2 hours, then anything over that, you prorate it by the hour. You don't charge for a full additional hour. Say, for example, if it was 2.5 hours, then you charge for, you know, $37.50 instead of $45. So that's what Nevada requires, but they require you to enter it in the journal. And we also have to put in the beginning and ending time when we started our travel and ended our travel.
That's super interesting. Now, what can you charge after 7 p.m.?
I usually don't travel after that.
I don't blame you.
It gets dark.
I want to say it's $25 an hour.
That does sound right. I think it
Okay.
is 25 an hour. Mm-hmm.
I haven't taught a notary class in Nevada since probably like 2007. So bear with me, but it's been a while.
But it's interesting to hear how specific, right, Nevada law is and how not specific New York law is, right? The differences between state is always fascinating for me.
Well, like Arizona said you can charge mileage, but it's not even the federal IRS rate. It's like 43 cents. And they just haven't updated it and stayed up with the federal tax. So some states do get so specific like that. And some are like, negotiate whatever your signer is willing to pay.
And in Nevada, we cannot charge mileage in addition to that. That mileage is built into the $15 per hour.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
You can go, Diana. I know you're so excited. And I'm so happy to see you.
I'm 4 days post-op. I'm doing okay. So, Nicola, I was so impressed with this young lady that's our hostess and another colleague. And they were passing out goodies at one of the conferences, either before or after classes. And I'd like a Mother May I, because I have this idea. I have some bookmarks that have like a little magnifying glass in it, and then it has different sayings. And I was thinking it would be like really cool if I could do something like that, but have like maybe verbiage for an oath or something. And so I just wondered, is there any protocol? Do I gotta do any, okay, so I don't get in the doghouse, because I do not want to be a problem, but I thought it was just so cool and so fun, and I was impressed.
That's an amazing idea, Diana. And don't tell anybody else about it. Go get a patent for it. No, so dramatic.
Marcy, you and I are in.
I'm in. She told me first, so I want to be in on this. And I was like, yeah, as long as
that's a great idea.
Some people would love that.
Yes. You can have an oath on one side and an affirmation on the other. Mm-hmm. And the magnifying glass, because I know my site is going. Like if you put anything on the screen, the glasses are coming out now. So
I can't read tiny print anymore either. So how many would I need to bring? Because I don't know about the quantity. How much would I need to get printed?
I would say if you bring 500, that'll be one for everybody. And if you just want to bring it for your friendsies, then you pick the number. But I think we're going to have about 500 people at the conference.
Are we sold out, Nicola?
So the full conference, which includes the workshops, the exhibits, and then like breakfast and the gala, that part is sold out. But we still have a workshop and exhibitor pass for the people that aren't necessarily maybe interested in all of the socializing that goes along, or they want to do it independently. We have the workshop and exhibitor pass. And I thought that it was going to be mostly people from the Phoenix area or Scottsdale area that were going to do it. But actually, there's quite a few people coming from other states that are coming to just do this. So those are still available. Please don't ask me how much they cost because I forgot. But Marcy and Diana, you can tell anybody that, a lot of the networking happens outside of the conference, just hanging out with all your notary friends. So even if you're not at the specific events, there's still a ton of fun to be had and a lot to learn, because a lot of the learning and the tips and stuff you take away are done outside of the workshops, just chit-chatting with people. So
it's true. If you've never been to a conference or have been on the edge of should I go, should I not go? And I know there's a lot of conversation about out there whether it's worthwhile or not. I can honestly say I think I thought the same thing until I went to my first one, and I have met so many amazing notaries across the country that I still talk to. I mean, I would have never met Diana in Texas from me being in New York. I have a very good colleague, Fred, now from Alabama, that we chit chat all the time. There's just been a great network of people who have helped, not even just with the notary sphere, right? But they've come, like Nicola, and done webinars for us and talked to us and been great sounding boards. So the networking in and of itself is great because everyone who's there isn't necessarily considering themselves competition like it may be when you're home. Everyone there is really anxious to help you and wants to network and wants to share information. And for some of us who live in areas where that's not the case, it is great to be an entrepreneur amongst other entrepreneurs.
And you can steal all their ideas because they're doing them in another state.
True story. You can. Don't tell them we said that.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, they're telling you all the stuff they're doing that's working for them, and then you can implement it. I think stealing is a harsh word, but you can take all of that. I mean, everybody's there for the spirit of trying to help people because and it's such a weird niche, like what we do. So to have a group of people that actually understand what you're doing exactly, like that's my favorite part and gets me excited because there's not very many people that want to talk notary talk with me. So to be around, you know, a bunch of people that want to, I'm going to seize that opportunity.
And we have a ton of fun. It's not all business. We do have a really good time.
It is weirdly fun. Like if you said 500 notaries are going to be a great time, I would not believe you, but
it really is. Sure.
I've been going since 2004 and it's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. Who else has a question for Nicola? Hi, Jim.
Hey, Marcy. Had an interesting situation about a week ago, and I'll tell you what I did, but I'd like to get, you know, the NNA's feedback on whether this crosses the line into the practice of law or not. I had a call from, I guess, an uncle saying, hey, you know, my daughter, well, it's a father. My daughter has been in jail. She's out now, and she wants to see her kids. And apparently the person that's taking care of the kids, I think, is another family member, a sister, a cousin or something. But in order to see them, she needs to have a statement notarized by the person who is the guardian now, that it's okay for her to come and see them. So I said, okay. I said, you know, let me know, you know, where you want me to go to, you know, to notarize this document and so forth. And so then I get a text that says, and I'm not going to share any names or anything, but there's a date, and it said, to whom it concern, I, so-and-so, have no objections for so-and-so to see her children, and signed, and then an address and a phone number. And so I texted back, I said, I just want to make sure you actually have that document, right? And like, you know, you have something with like a notary certificate attached. And she texted back and said, no, I need you to print that out and bring that with you. And so obviously there's no notary certificate. And I know that, you know, and I have a whole thing in my kit where, you know, I could say, if there's not a certificate, you know, here's the differences, you know, but you have to choose because I can't practice law. But I thought about this. I thought me printing that out, you know, and maybe editing, you know, because there's like some grammar issues there, and me printing that out, that just feels like practicing law. Like, you know, an attorney should be drafting this. And so I turned him down. You know, I said, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, unless you have the document. And, you know, I don't feel comfortable doing this because for me, it crossed the line, or at a minimum, it came right up to the line. So I was just interested to hear what you thought about that. If that does cross the line, if it comes too close, if it's, you know, Jim, maybe you could have done it, or, you know, whatever.
No, Jim, give this man a blue ribbon because you did the right thing. that would have been preparing their document. And so, you know, if they had a document that got emailed and as a service to the customer, you would have printed it out and brought it, that's different than I have to fix this. I have to type this up myself. That's literally the preparation of the document, right? And then to your point, you still would have had to have them find out what certificate you would have had to attach because there is no wording. So no, 100%, I think turning it down in that instance without knowing anything else would have been, that's, you know, the thing to do, because you can't prepare the document and then turn around and notarize it.
Right. Okay.
Wendy's kind of nodding, so I think she agrees with me. Okay, she agrees.
Cool. Appreciate that.
Great question.
Yeah.
Who else wants to talk to Nicola? This is your chance.
Somebody on LinkedIn said they were going to ask me about the Mets, so that made me laugh.
Did they come to ask you that? I want to ask a question about background checks. So let's talk about background checks in terms of, you know, for loan signing agents, right?
Okay.
There's some conversation like, why do you need my background check? That's personal information. Why should I give you my personal information? Why do you need that, right? That's an invasion of my privacy. I have a right to privacy and you shouldn't know those things about me. What is the stance of the NNA when it comes to background checks? Why are they important? Why do we need them?
Okay, well, I'll start. I won't even speak about the NNA. I will start with, I believe it's the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of 2001 that came out after 9/11, which basically required anybody who was going to ascertain certain information like social security numbers to have some kind of background screening that was run through money laundering, terrorist websites, just a background to check that someone who was going to have access to the most personal thing that could steal someone's identity had some kind of verification. And because in most states, you don't have to get any kind of background check, I think this was the way to do it. So, I mean, notaries aren't even the only ones that have to do it. You know, everybody in the loan process has to do it because of the access. But more specifically, if you think about it, the signing agent is actually going to the borrower's home. They're entering the borrower's home. And what you're doing is giving them a peace of mind that like, hey, I'm not a felon. Hey, I'm not going to steal your information. You know, and I think it's a requirement of, you know, federal regulations, but also of the title companies to make sure that who they're entrusting this to do. Because to be quite honest, you know, outside of a few states, most notaries just go to an office and they go, do you promise to be the best notary ever? And they say yes. And then they go, congratulations, you are one. There's no exam like there is in New York. They just, you know, go and that's it. They're a notary. So I think it's peace of mind all around. And why do you have to do it every year? Well, they have to make sure you haven't committed a crime during the year, which could also be a status change for that. So, you know, it's happening constantly. And then you think about the people that aren't even getting the background checks and they're soliciting with fake certificates that they have them and still going and performing these acts. So unfortunately, you know, notaries are people of integrity, but rules are always getting broken in every sector, you know, in every realm of the universe. But that's the not so short version of why.
So are you saying that some notaries are forging their own background checks? Is that what you're telling me? See, if everyone used their powers for good, can you imagine what we could accomplish in this world? That's an interesting take. I would have never thought to do something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you know, that's actually part of the reason why NNA stopped giving certificates for people who are NNA certified, because they were going up on the internet and being altered.
Been duplicated so they could put their name on someone else's. So
now you just get the badge on your signingagent.com profile and that's it. That's how you are verified.
Well, that's interesting information. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
I don't mind doing the background check. I think that's great. I think people feel a lot more comfortable when you go in with it. My only thing is that when I call to do it every year, it's, oh, you're from New York. Well, and then there's that big extra fee that's tapped on.
Yeah, and I can't remember why right now. It's something to do with accessing the records costs money. So every time somebody has to do the check, it's the fees assessed by, like, I think it's the Department of Public Records. Like, they're going in and doing the check, but they get charged a fee in turn. So
I don't think New York's records are all in one place, like a lot of states. I think that they actually have to go into like another database to get some of that information, or it used to be that way. And that was part of the fee as well.
I will take your word for it because I know it is more expensive, but I can't remember why.
That used to be it. Whether that's still the case or not, I just remember there was some information at the state level, and then there was some at like the county level. And so both of those had to be searched.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the New York Office of Court Administration fee.
Man, Wendy's quick.
She is quick. That's why she's the supervisor of the hotline.
You know it.
Who else has a question or scenario for these nice ladies who joined us this evening?
I'd be interested in hearing more about Ron, from the NNA's perspective. We hear that it's coming. We hear that it's here. I know that, in some places, I guess it's active, but what are the use cases? I mean, what's your perspective? Do you see people using it a lot? And what are they using it for? What kinds of documents are coming through with that?
So I'll be honest, this is not my area of expertise, but I will tell you that I am on the same journey that you are in just understanding it myself, because California, we're probably going to be the last state that picks it up because there's so many things. But here's what I will say. The notaries that I know in Texas and Florida and Virginia that have been doing it Virginia's had it for 10 years, if you think about it. So it's a lot of military support for when a spout, they have to get documents notarized and the person's overseas and they need a notary and something notarized here. I know that there's a lot of powers of attorney that are going through that way. And then there's just good old fashioned, it's the middle of the night and they can't find a notary. And I know that there are some platforms that offer that 24-hour service, but one of the I'm going to say issues, for lack of a better word, is the county recorders don't have the technology to accept these documents that were notarized with this technology. So there's still a workaround where it gets printed off in paper, and then the notary has to do kind of like a copy certification thing where they certify that the digital documents the same as this piece of paper that's going to the county recorder. So it really is still kind of getting all worked out. But there's states that are using it. I do know that. But as far as, is this going to be the next latest and greatest? I don't know. What seems more tangible to me and is the in-person electronic notarizations where the documents are electronic. You're doing your transactions like on a tablet type thing, but there's still a notary. There's still that face-to-face, there's still that pen, if you will, and the identification process is happening in real life. Because when attorneys are trying to, discredit a notarization, the first thing they're going to, or their transaction or a contract, the first thing they're going to look at is a notarization. So to me, having that human that, did all the things, is what's going to be able to be easier to look at and say, okay, they did this, they did this, they did this, as opposed to it all happening like on a screen. Because I have no idea what's happening off to the side of your screen. I have a background on mine. I mean, there's no telling what's happening behind the scenes here where I am. So I don't know. There's still more to come on, Ron. I don't know I can't speak from an NNA standpoint because, it's just, we want what's best for the notary. And right now this is working. So, let's see what happens next. But I know a lot of states are picking it up. And I think as things start to happen, or if any issues do arise, the laws will change accordingly. But I'm interested to see where the technology is going to go. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, you know, I go on various calls, and I went on one today in a, you know, assisted living center, and, you know, some people have a hard enough time when you point to the box where they have to sign. I can't imagine, you know, using technology like Ron. It would be so far beyond that. So I'm just trying to think, is there, you know, what are the markets for this? You know, if I wanted to start to sign up for this, what would I target? You know, how could I get business out of this?
Well, I think that is something that if you do decide to explore, that's a question for the platform provider. Like they should be able to give you that information to help you to market. That should be, you know, because I know that there are some that will actually bring clients to you. And do they let you bring your own clients in? Is some of the questions. But I know that there is a lady who on YouTube is called Side Hustle Seattle. And she basically has a video where she goes through all the ROM providers and like what they offer. But I do know that I would make sure that they can be compatible with New York if this VPN thing actually stays, because I think, you know, to Marcy's point, that is going to be a blocker for most providers right now, because, you know, VPN is a security thing as well to keep the transaction secure. I mean, I know that we use it when we all started working remotely. Everybody had to lock into the VPN to make sure that everything was kind of staying. And you can tell I'm not technological by the way I'm talking about this, by the way. I'm a pen and paper notary. That's how I learned. So
I'm going to say too, so ones we've been actually was on a call today with the New York State Bar Association, and one of the attorneys there, she has a huge client base in Israel, and they have a lot of work they do here in the US. And she said she uses remote online all the time for those individuals, because then they don't have to go to the embassy, right, to get the apostille. They just, it saves them that
because
trip.
they used an American notary.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Even the ones that I've done, which is so funny, they've been for attorneys who've been traveling, who've been overseas, who have documents that have to be notarized to be filed at court, and they are on a deadline. So they've been like, hey, Marcy, can you do this for me so I can get this stuff filed? That's the kind of stuff I think you're going to see. I know everyone's like loan signings. I'm not entirely sure that that's where we are necessarily, right? Because there are a lot of other components involved in that. There's a title company, there's the recording, right? And
oh yeah,
as Nicola said, you know, here in New York with our new laws, we have this papering out process where if they want to record the mortgage from Ron, we print it out, we attach a certificate of authenticity, and we ship that paper copy off, right? Because we have a lot of counties who can't record electronically still. From what I've spoken to the platforms, you know, when it comes to loan signings, it's been like seller documents, modifications, home equity lines of credit, right? Not a ton of purchase refinance stuff, but it has been those onesie, twosie things. Lots of military, right, who are overseas, lots of individuals. I mean, when you think about the amount of individuals who buy property in the US, right, who are not US citizens or who are investors, it makes a difference for them. In trailing documents, the batch that we've done too has been, hey, this document was left out of a package. It's like one title affidavit, right? Or again, they're overseas. They can't get to an embassy. There's not an embassy close by. I think Notarize put an article out that the #1 document notarized by Ron was that form from the post office that lets them scan in your mail to you. Like everyone gets that done. It's the #1 document. You know, permission slips. I think it's more along those lines, right?
And jail. I think they're used for inmates too, because they have to, you know, turn over permission to do things if they're going to be incarcerated for a while. So rather than having the notary come in and doing the whole, you know, inspection and rigmarole, they just do the RON transaction straight from the jail.
So here's my question again with the notary journal. What do we do with that in a Ron situation?
It's like embedded into the whole shebang. So a journal entry is created because the whole transaction gets recorded, and that recording has to be saved, and then a journal entry gets created. So that, and then this is the next component, is how many journals are you allowed to have? Can you have one electronic and one paper? Does everything have to get recorded on paper? Can it be saved in the cloud, or do you have to be the person that saves it? Because some of the providers will do all of that stuff. So those are part of the questions that you should ask when you decide like to sign up with the platform, is what's the journal situation as well? Because in theory, they're supposed to be keeping track of that for you. But in the cases where you're only allowed to keep one journal, sometimes they'll say one journal, one electronic. So that's something you want to make sure you know going into it so that you are following it to the letter.
And what happens to your journal if you stop being a Ron notary, if you leave the platform? Because again, you are still ultimately responsible for that journal, right? And if that platform goes by the wayside or their backup, something happens to it, doesn't really matter. Your governing entity wants to know. So can you download that journal with you?
Right.
Yeah. Do you have access to it? Do they hold it and charge you for it, right? Or do you need to get, a box account and drop all that in there? Those are important questions to ask, because what you don't want to have happen is you leave there thinking they're holding it for you, and maybe they're not, or they won't allow you to access it. And then what happens if you need to get back into it? So those are important questions when you're researching your platform, to make sure that you still have access and that someone's holding on to that. You certainly don't want to take with you, 100 recordings and let them sit on your desktop, right? Like there's all sorts of information in there. So you need to have a plan for what to do with that information should you leave.
There's lots of information out there from people who have been doing it. And even if they're in another state, it's still, I think, beneficial to listen to what they're doing and then go, okay, can I do this? Can I apply that here? Because it is happening. A lot of places. I mean, I feel like there's like 29 states that have it now. And before it was like 12. So in a matter of like 2 years, it's doubled of how many states are adopting it. But I think it's going to be a while before this is the way.
I think it's 42 states now, Nicola, isn't it?
Oh, get out. It could be.
I think it's up there. COVID, let's be honest, expedited.
That's true.
Right?
And they may have adapted some kind of legislation to do it, but there's a lot of states that don't have any rules to go with it. So they've said, okay, you can do it, but there's no guidelines about what steps to take. So it's as much as it's advancing, it's still it's still in its infancy. So for me personally, it's not my bag per se. So I leave it to the platform providers to do the education on that front, which is why I'm so technologically challenged. But the technological providers do come to the conference. So if you wanted to meet them face to face and talk to them and let them tell you why they're so great, that is a good opportunity to do that. And they host a lot of things too. They're really easy to access online. And there's a lot of choices out there, and it's very competitive. So I do appreciate that, because it really is the notary's world to figure out exactly what they want to use.
I think we did a list, and there's probably between 20 and 30 Ron platforms right now, the last time we looked at it. So there's certainly plenty of opportunity out there. You just want to make sure they're compliant to your particular state. Who else wants to ask Nicola or Wendy a question? Or chat about anything really? The weather, what you guys did today.
So one thing I'll mention, Marcy, is we actually asked the Department of State when the notary exam was going to get updated to reflect all the new laws, and they said they're working on it. So if you know anyone who's getting ready to renew, hurry up and do it.
Well, it's so funny because there's a lot going on in New York currently with these laws and a lot of upheaval, but part of the new law was that you can now renew your notary license online directly with the Division of Licensing. But by statute, you cannot. The statute specifically says that you must renew your notary license with your with the county that you qualify in. And one of the county clerks just came out and said, don't renew online. If you renew online, it won't be a valid notarization. And so now there's a little bit of upheaval sort of going on in that space. So
that's interesting.
I don't think
because everything got pushed out like a week sooner, right?
It was supposed to all be in effect February 1st. And they said the register would come out January 25th with the updated regs. And then it came out and they were like, effective today, everybody needs a journal. And everyone was like, what? No one does anything about that. And then the platforms, saw the requirement regarding the VPN, and it's sort of vague. So a lot of the platforms shut off the New York notaries at that point, refunded their money, which I give them, credit for. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want you to get in trouble, right? So I know it's a little bit of upheaval, but that's what you want. You want a technology partner that's looking out for your interests too, right?
That's knows the laws and knows the laws.
And then there were other platforms who were like, hey, no, we're good, come aboard. Which again, I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm just saying, we all want to use caution. So there wasn't an adjustment period. There were some things that were put in the final regs that were not brought up in the temporary regs. And it's caused a little bit of confusion. Plus, they all put it under the umbrella of electronic notarization, but didn't say in there, hey, we also changed journaling for traditional notarization and ID requirements. We've never had an ID requirement in New York, right? You could take whatever you felt reasonably prove that person was who they are. And now suddenly you can take government ID, you could take 2 alternate IDs, you can use credible witnesses, right? We've never used before. So
put that Costco card away.
So it's brought up all of these things. And if you're from New York, and maybe, we have a large attorney population, and here in New York, attorneys, by virtue of being attorneys, get their notary commission. They're not required to take the exam. And they're very upset that their bar associations and their lobbyists didn't accept them from having to keep a journal or to do any of this. So they're currently in this space where, well, how much trouble will we get into if we don't keep a journal? Like, will they just take my commission away, which is fine, and we just won't keep the journal, which is not what I would propose to anybody. But there's a lot of conversation, so I suspect that this is not the end of what we'll see here. I think there'll be some changes as well. But yeah, certainly the notary, we still have protests, right? We can charge like 50 cents for a protest. Anyone seen a protest outside of the 1800s? Like, no.
Don't do it.
Right? So it all needs to be updated. And, if you ever heard me talk, I'm just an advocate for education for everybody. I think it's super important. So, we started the New York Notary Association, the New York Notary Alliance for a reason. We think it's important to try to bring everyone together to advocate for New York notaries to be educated and do the right things and make sure that we're protecting ourselves. But, consumers, that's the big piece of this, right? Are we doing the right thing for the people who are coming to us? Because that's part of who we are, right? We're public servants. We want to do the right thing, and we want to make sure we're not causing them any sort of financial harm down the road. And unfortunately, that happens at times.
For sure. Ms. Anderson, did you have a question? I think you were going to try to ask a question.
Yeah, I did. And I'm about to have to jump off of here, but I'm in Texas and just wanted to know for Texas, what is all considered incidentals?
You mean in terms of like charging?
Yes.
Just any expense that you incur for, because of the performance of the notarization. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So parking, tolls. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I understood that right.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you go to a hotel and they say, can I have your credit card for incidentals? It's just any charges that you're going to put while you're staying at the resort. So anything extra that it's costing you, that you're coming out of pocket for.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make for sure that that I had that right. I thought I did, but I just wanted to make for sure. Thank you.
Of course.
We're going to wrap up here shortly. Do you guys have any other questions or situations that you want to talk about, or the NNA in general? All right. Well, Nicola and Wendy, I'm so appreciative of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. It was very helpful and great information. And, you know, I'm a huge advocate of the NNA. I'm an ambassador. So if
yes,
you
are.
Questions, I'm throwing it out there. So
I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anyone thinks of anything, you can shoot me an email. And also on February 14th, myself and Susie Sivkov, if you had not had the pleasure, we're going to be hosting a Valentine's Day event. We're called We Love Our Notaries. We're going to give away prizes like memberships, free NNA certification, special guests. We did it on Notary Public Day and it was a little wild, but anyway, we love giving away free stuff, and Susie and I have been around a while, so we really do love the notaries. But so if you can come, look out for event invites on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can find me at Notary Nicola. Anyway, I'm on social media, and we'll have the link up there to join us for the Zoom event, or the National Notary Association is going to have it on their page too. So we would love to see you and win some prizes. And we're here if you have any questions. Yeah, and I thank you, Wendy, for being my backup.
Yes, and if you have an opportunity ever to go to a conference, highly suggest that we'd love to see you. Is Kat back from Antarctica?
She is.
So excited to see Kat. All right, perfect. Anything else you ladies want to add?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm so excited to talk to everybody, and good luck with all your new laws, and call the hotline if you have any questions.
Yeah, we'll see you guys on Valentine's Day. I'll see all of you on Valentine's Day at Nicola and Susie's event. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.